And so just in case folks didn't catch it, we'll chant a couple chants in a few moments. After that, we'll meditate and then Dharma reflections. Then some folks may want to hop off, and then I'll stick around for another 20 minutes until 20 past the next hour for any questions, comments, sharing, celebrations, shares, anything like that. Yeah. So do you see the link to the chant booklet in the chat? Yeah, okay. So you can open it up. Some of you might already know the chants. The ones we'll do this morning are on top of page 3, the Namo Tassa Bhagavato. We'll chant that in Pali 3 times. And then I think simply for the sake of time, we'll only chant in Pali, not the English. I'll leave just a moment of pause so that we can check in with how the chant reverberates or vibrates in our body. And then we'll go on to page 4, the recollection of the triple jewel, and chant that one. Okay. And let me just double check. I'm going to mute all. Yeah. So that you'll only hear my voice, but feel free or please chant along with me. And if you're uncomfortable with chanting, you can simply just take in the sounds and notice how it reverberates in your system, whether pleasant, unpleasant, all of it is welcome. Just as all of you are welcome in all of your identities and all of your moods and emotions and ways you identify, that is, of course, also welcome here. You can put your hands together if you like, or if that feels supportive. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. And then moving on to page 4, recollection of the triple jewel. Itipiso bhagava araham sama sambuddho vijacharana sampano sugato lokavidu anuttaro purisa dhamma saratisata deva manusanam buddho bhagavati savakato bhagavata dhammo sanditiko akaliko ehipasiko opanaiko pachatam veditabo vinyuhiti supatipano bhagavato sawakasango Ujipatipano bhagavato sawakasango Naya patipano bhagavato sawakasango Samichi patipano bhagavato sawakasango Yadidam chatari purisa yuganiya tapurisa pugala Esa bhagavato sawakasango ahunayom pahunayom dakinayom anjali karaniyom anuttaram punyaketam loka sati. So often we would simply slide into the meditation. However, because today I want to talk about intention and in particular, I'd love for us to explore a type of intention that I'll talk about later. I find it is most easy to explore first in our meditation, then going into the Dharma reflections. One of the easiest ways, and this is completely optional, but one of the easiest ways, and I would, for those who are able, we can explore this is by starting standing or doing a standing meditation. And before you shift or anything, just notice how that feels. Some folks, when you're settled into your meditation posture, there's just this like inner humph. I'm not moving. I'm comfortable. I'm warm. I'm settled. That's fine. No judgment. And we're not going to be standing the entire time either. So at some point, I will invite you to transition to seated or whatever your preferred posture will be. But in the interim, instead of maybe going into autopilot and just settling into whatever posture that is, I'll be asking you or prompting you to notice the urge, the volition to transition into seated. How, and then I'll give more cueing around that in the meditation. But at some point, the urge to move from standing to a different posture will not be strong. And so you might stay standing. You might have been waiting for the permission to change posture. So you transition right away. So it's really up to you. But just know that that's part of this next part of meditation. So if you're able, if you're open, if you're willing to transition into or to start in a standing meditation, please go ahead. And if not, I'll give other options to explore this afterward as well. And if you're remaining seated or lying down, I'll give some cueing so that you can still be included in this meditation. It's not just kind of like a good luck, see you later. So settle into whatever posture you ended up choosing. Standing for some of us, seated or laying down. And as you settle into this posture, maybe just take a moment to tune into how you might want to settle in further. Maybe taking a few deep breaths, maybe looking around, maybe adjusting your posture. And eventually, but really no rush, whether it's now or in a little while, eventually bring your gaze either to turn downward or to close your eyes. First, simply notice whatever you notice. Maybe you're still working out the posture you're in. Maybe it's sound, sensation, something else. Whether you're seated, standing, or laying down, Begin to notice if you're leaning a little bit more right or a little bit more left, but we're simply noticing. And so there might be this urge already to feel somewhat balanced or perfectly in between the two. But can you simply rest in noticing if you are more on one side than the other without jumping into fixing or judging? And in the same way, notice this is more for those standing or seated. If you're leaning slightly forward or slightly back, and the ways that if you're lying down, it can manifest for you is, are you holding? Are you bracing? Or are you letting yourself completely go into the floor or ground? And so again, just noticing without fixing. If you like, you can adjust by simply swaying side to side, forward and back, to find that balance point for those seated or standing. If you're laying down, maybe begin to allow yourself to be held by the ground instead of continuing to hold or brace. Invite your body to relax, your heart and mind to relax as well. And for a few moments, resting here, letting go of any resisting if there is resistance. And if there isn't, relaxing and simply noticing mindfulness coming, mindfulness going. Now, whenever you're ready, at any point you can transition from standing to seated or lying down. But instead of simply hopping into the next posture, if you would like to change, begin to simply notice what kinds of thoughts, what kind of sensations might lead up to the change in posture. For example, it might be feeling discomfort and wanting relief from that suffering. Maybe for you instead, it's wanting to be the last one standing. And so instead you remain standing, overriding the volitional urge to change postures. Maybe the urge to sit or lay down is kind of there, but it's not very strong, and so it fades away. And then in a few moments, you'll feel a pang maybe in a part of the body, and then the urge to change postures arises again. And that time it might be strong enough so that you actually sit or lie down. And so for these next few minutes, your only task is to simply notice these urges that come and go, that might be strong, that might be subtle. And the energy behind these urges that you don't always need to choose or act out. After you've transitioned postures, or if the urge is not compelling, all you do from here on out is simply observe. Either observe your breath or continue observing mindfulness come and go. Whatever posture you're in, continue to relax body, heart, mind. And in the last few moments that are left here, you can let go of any way that you're practicing and simply rest. Not doing anything, not needing to be anything, just simply exist, something that you're already really good at doing. Not practicing, not producing, just being. In a moment, I'll ring the bell. If possible, take in the 3 chimes of the bell as a full body experience. Thank you. Welcome back. And then whatever you need to do to help you take in some Dharma reflection, stretch. If you're still standing, please, whatever posture is comfortable for you here on out. Lie down, lay on your side, get popcorn, whatever you need. And so, as many of you know, I want to talk about the topic of intentions today. I love I love contemplating intentions or this practice at this time of year because it's often a time where we are thinking about the year ahead with this change of Gregorian calendar. And we might see it as like this clear slate or this suddenly this new possibility in front of us. The term intention, I think, is used a little vaguely. I hear it a lot, but I think especially when I consider the Buddhist teachings, it can come across as vague, specifically because I think of 3 Buddhist practices in particular that some of you might have seen in the last or the latest Sacred Mountain Sangha newsletter. At different times, the word intention can mean different things. But in all of the cases, it's this quality of mind that is key for anything that we do in our lives. Intention, what I love, especially in the context of the Eightfold Path, the Buddhist Eightfold Path, intention is the energetic bridge between understanding and action. So understanding samaditi, wise view, and then the second path factor is samasankappa, wise intention. And then the next 3 parts of the Eightfold Path are the action parts, wise livelihood, wise action, wise speech. And so in this way, intention is really this energetic bridge between understanding and action. And so it adds wisdom and purpose to our actions. It shapes not just our actions, but also how we respond to and experience the world. Of course, especially I don't want to make this assumption, but I like to think that a lot of us as practitioners, we're called to and invited to begin to intend to be kind, to be open-hearted, to be gentle in our lives. I think that's one of the things that really brings a lot of us together as practitioners. And of course, though, the world is intense, the polycrises, the divisiveness, etc. And so given the intensity or the extreme of the world, of course, we're not going to get it right all of the time. But I think it's still important to have this initial intention for this kindness, this open-heartedness, or else we'll never have it. One of my favorite quotes that I share kind of like all the time comes from author, activist, filmmaker Valerie Kaur. And she says, she recognizes like these times are challenging, these times are dark. But then the quote that I love from her is this the darkness of the tomb, or is this the darkness of the womb? And I think that's why we practice. If we don't practice, if we don't continue to committing for this intention of kindness and open-heartedness, then simply by our inaction, we're contributing to the perspective that it is the darkness of the tomb. Or with our practice, with our intentions, then we can contribute to this perspective or possibility that no, this darkness is the darkness of the womb. Or maybe on another note or another kind of flavor, I don't know who the author of this one is, but it's phrased as a prayer. Dear Lord, so far today, I've done all right. I haven't gossiped, I haven't lost my temper, I haven't been greedy or grumpy, nasty, selfish, or overindulgent. I'm really glad about that. But in a few minutes, God, I'm going to get out of bed. And from then on, I'm going to need a lot more help. And so the purpose of mindfulness or our mindfulness practice is to develop this clear seeing, this clarity. And out of that clarity, the possibility of wise response can grow or can flourish. And so what we're trying to do with our practice is to pay attention to the moment to moment of our experience, which perhaps you were able to do in the standing meditation before transitioning to another posture. We try to pay close attention to the moment to moment part of our experience so that we can learn from it. And it might not be news to you, especially for those of you who have been practicing a long time. You might be thinking, well, yeah, duh. But I still think it's worth mentioning and worth celebrating because I actually think it's huge that when something comes into our awareness and we can see it clearly, it's only then can we actually begin to start working with that experience. Because as long as we're not seeing it or seeing it clearly, it's impossible for us to work with that experience or to begin to transform it. And so in regards to intentions, when we start working with intention as this energetic quality, we begin to notice that it's not the act of intending that we're cultivating, but it's the constant connection to our intention. And so I think that's like an important distinction that is worthy of making. So I'll repeat it again. It's not the act of intending that we're cultivating, because that's nice, but that's simply the planting the seed. But what we're trying to do is actually cultivate a constant connection to our intention. The three Buddhist practices that I think of in particular, usually around this time of year, and in this moment, what's coming up is like, I should really try and contemplate this all year long though, but anyways, maybe that'll be my intention. But the three Buddhist practices, the first one is Sammasankappa, wise intention. The second is adhitthana, determination. And that quality comes from the 10 perfections of the heart. And then there's Chetana. But before I go on, I think better in visuals, and I like designing things. So let me see if I have this. I created this image that I can pop into the chat as well after this. Here we are. So do you see this image on my screen? You don't see all of my unfinished documents instead on my screen? Okay, good. So 3 Buddhist practices to help shape intentions. And so it's formed in this sort of funnel, because the way that I see it is the teaching in this Samma Sankappa comes from the Eightfold Path. And so that wise intention, this bigger, broader intention, feeds into adhitthana, this determination or resolve. And I like determination as a translation as well as resolve, because resolve comes from the same root as resolution, which is a very common practice at this time of year. And then Chetana, urge, the volitional urge that some of you have already been experimenting with in our standing meditation. And so I think of it as this funnel, each one leading into the other. Maybe a better indication would be than this, the Chetana, I would maybe draw an arrow, and it feeds into, or feeds information back into wise intention. Was my urge or how I showed up in line? And is there anything here that might need to be readjusted? Or maybe the urge would feed back into determination. But all of this to say is it doesn't just end here, but it's kind of this cycle that continues to inform itself. So I'll stop the share. But just in case that is helpful for some folks to visualize. And then let me see if I could quickly post this into the chat. No, I'm not able to. So I'll figure some other way to share it. But all this to say, Samma Sankappa, wise intention, it's about making a commitment to not cause suffering to ourselves or others now and in the future. And part of it requires us to give up or renounce the desires that would cause harm. In this teaching, Samma Sankappa, there are 3 subcategories. It's the intention for goodwill. That's often paraphrased as loving kindness. The intention for harmlessness, compassion. And then nekkhamma, the intention for renunciation. And so our wise intention empowers us to align our thoughts, words, and actions with this deep understanding. And what's the deep understanding? Well, in the Buddhist perspective, it's that we're trying to lessen the amount of suffering there is. Not just for ourselves, but for all beings. I feel like we hear a lot in different places, a lot about loving kindness and compassion. So I just want to make a small note about renunciation. That one doesn't get as much airtime, especially in our consumerist, capitalist culture. But renunciation is about renouncing clinging. And it could be clinging to objects, roles, identities, views, etc. And it's not to say that it's all bad. Of course, that's not it at all. But Bhikkhu Bodhi in the book, the Noble Eightfold Path, he says, real renunciation is not a matter of compelling ourselves to give up things we still inwardly cherish, but of changing our perspective on them so that they no longer bind us. And just maybe a little disclaimer, that's not to say that, because I mentioned identities, it's not, I don't want to undercut and say that, suddenly gender identification, racial identification is not important, and then we can suddenly have more proof in the teachings to bypass that. That is not it at all. But just, I was thinking more in, say, at least for me, the identity as teacher or something like that, and how I might over-identify with that and how that can cause suffering. And so just, that note that it's not about weaponizing or using these teachings to bypass. The next part of the funnel that I mentioned is adhitthana, and that comes from the 10 perfections of the heart, the 10 paramis, resolve or determination. And I think when a lot of us say intention, this is what we're really trying to say. And adhitthana is necessary for us to actually deepen anything that we're undertaking. So we need this determination to continue to stay in constant connection to our intention for loving kindness or compassion or renunciation, for example, or learning to play the ukulele that some of you know I've been trying 3 times to learn how to play. I'll get there one day. Or in our case, ukulele playing or not, adhitthana is what got us all here on a Sunday morning or Sunday evening for some. It's the sense that gathering together in Sangha is for our benefit and the well-being of others. And so it's what brought us here, and it's also what keeps us going, what keeps us practicing. Adhitthana, I think, also is so helpful to have if for anyone that does goal setting or resolution making at this time of year or any time of year. Adhitthana is what helps us connect or reconnect with ourselves when we lose touch with ourselves, or these emotional storms, or we fall off the wagon, proverbially speaking. And so, of course, sometimes things will go well for us or the way that we want or think that we've planned for them to go, and others, they won't. It won't unfold in that way. But what adhitthana or determination helps us with is that we do not measure our self-worth according to these fluctuations, basically, to the changing emotions or changing conditions around us. And so working with intentions is this commitment to the process, not the outcome, basically. It's moving toward a way of being, but not becoming obsessed with it. And it's called a practice, in large part because it's this ever-renewing process. And then finally, cetana. So that's the part that maybe was the most obvious for those of you who participated in my standing meditation experiment. It's this volitional urge to do or take action. And so even though it's a mental factor, it's often very quick and subtle. So much so that in daily life, we could not notice it, or we can think it's unchangeable. Kind of like, well, this is how I am, take it or leave it kind of thing. But some of you might have been able to pay close attention to it during the meditation, and you felt it physically. And so in that way, we can practice with it, that every movement of the body we make, it's preceded with this intention to move. Every action we take, it's preceded by this intention to act or not act. And so once we start seeing that with our awareness, then we can start to kind of untangle it, tease it apart, so that we can check in, is this still in line with our intentions or not? The example that was given in the SMS newsletter. And so let me just post it in the chat in case folks haven't read it. You can take a look at it later. But for example, it's like if you're at the grocery store after a long day and you're at the checkout line and you arrive at the shortest cashier line at the same time as someone else. This happens to me all the time. And then I have 3 items in my arms. This other person who arrived at the same time has like a cart full. I could feign ignorance and just kind of like edge my way in front, or I could notice the volitional, the energy that, or the physical sensations that might arise with wanting to do that action. And then in that moment of pause, I might remember my resolve or my determination to stay connected to my larger, broader intentions for loving kindness or compassion. And that might lead me to simply say, may I go in front of you? Or it might be like, allowing that other person to go or something like that. So suddenly a new response is possible instead of one of me against the world kind of thing. And so when I found out, or when I learned about this quality of chetana, it just made things a lot more fun, I think, for my daily life, where suddenly practice wasn't just this thing that I did on the cushion at the beginning or end of the day. Intention wasn't this thing that I said to myself in the mirror in the mornings when I brushed my teeth or whatever. But it was this thing that I could pay attention to and watch come alive throughout the day, through every moment, if I was able to pay attention that closely. And so since then, I really love practicing with it because we can really tune into it on a physical level. And it starts to open up this possibility that mindfulness can be there on the more subtle levels. And then eventually we can notice, or we might catch ourselves saying social situations, or we might say something inappropriate, or that could be potentially harmful, even if it's a joke. But to just maybe notice that urge. And the urge is rooted in wanting to connect. So loving kindness. But then how, the how of it, the impact of it is also being considered. And so basically, some of you might already know this, but in the Satipatthana Sutta, the teaching on the 4 foundations of mindfulness, there's what's called the refrain. And the refrain is repeated throughout that sutta 16 times. And so as some of you know, the 4 foundations of mindfulness are of the body, feelings or feeling tone, of the mind, and then the 4th is dhammas. And so the refrain, I'll just read it, but a very shortened version. And so the Buddha says, in this way, they abide contemplating the body, feelings, mind, dhammas, internally. Or they abide contemplating the body, feelings, mind, dhammas, externally. Or they abide contemplating body, feelings, mind, dhammas, both internally or externally. And so if we remember that the overall purpose of the Buddhist ethic is the end of suffering and to end also the causes of suffering, then I think it's in our interest to want to see clearly with our awareness the effects of our behavior. So that's the impact piece. Internally, externally, and both internally and externally. And so the refrain supports the scope of practice that encompasses our inner cognitive, so that's the inner part, and emotional lives, as well as our relationship to others. And so this is the external part. So people, plants, animals, the planet, the culture. But then the both piece is it enters into our individual and collective engagement. So basically our social, environmental, and political justice concerns. And so in my opinion, that's where the both come in. And so the external impact, basically what this teaching of intention, any one of them, so chetana, adhitthana, samasankappa, so whether it's the volitional urge, the determination, wise intention, it's inviting us to begin to inhabit a world that we're all connected to. And that everything we do in the world comes from our intentions. So again, our thoughts, our words, our actions. And the more that we're aware of our intentions, the more that our actions can be aligned with our intentions. A lot of times, especially at the beginning of the year, people want to find the most perfect or the intention that will be so encompassing for all aspects of their lives and all beings that it's like it's got to answer it all kind of thing, especially once we start touching into the depth and the significance and the importance of these teachings. But I think sometimes putting the pressure on ourselves to find like the best and the biggest and the whatever intention can get in the way of actually us living any of these values or these qualities in the world. And so just a reminder that, like everything, intentions are impermanent. They could change, they could evolve. They may not, it might have felt appropriate the moment you created an intention, and then maybe just a week later you have more perspective and it's like, no, I'm going to tweak that. I'm going to change it. Personally as well, there's this practice that I learned from a somatic therapist on Instagram that that she uses affirmations. And so it's this act of simply asking ourselves, what if? So instead of saying, I am loving and kind, it's what if I was loving and kind? And for me, I also felt that in this moment, but it just brings so much more space and possibility, makes me even a little bit tender, actually. And then suddenly, when I say, what if I am loving and kind? New images that I don't think could have arisen if it wasn't phrased in that way comes up. And so whatever your intention is, what if I am strong? What if I am open? What if I am generous? Our practice in creating less suffering and greater freedom is not just based on our intentions. It's based on everything that flows out from that intention. And then with our mindfulness practice, we try to then choose as wise of an action as is possible in that moment. And so maybe in a week's time, the way you acted in a moment, you can look back and think, ooh, that wasn't a great response. But in that moment, trust that it was as wise of an action or response as was available to you. And then to also notice the impact, the external impact of some nature that happens that we're invited to become aware of. And then from there, it feeds into how we show up the next time. Let me see, I wasn't planning on sharing this, but let me see if I can find it. Oh yes, here it is. So that piece comes from that last piece of just how our intentions lead to actions, then lead to impact, and then how that can inform our future actions. That comes from one of my teachers, Larry Yang, and in his book, which I love and highly recommend, called Awakening Together, he shares this image. And so on this side, so if you can see my cursor, on the left side is our personal, the ways we might show up personally. So our personal actions in our life, our personal intentions lead to personal actions, which then lead to this internal and external impact on self and others, which leads to increasing our awareness, increasing our learning, then feeds back into intention and keeps going in that way. And while this is all happening personally, it's also happening collectively. And when you put the two together, it forms this heart. And so making all of this a heart practice that our world so deeply needs. And then just this reminder that, again, this what is happening in the world is just intense. There's a lot going on, polycrises, and that's just collectively. And of course, there's all that we're navigating and holding personally. And so we're not trying to get it perfect or get it right every single time. Trying or aiming for that actually gets in the way often of us even acting. And so this also comes from Larry's book, this version of intention. May I be loving, open, and aware in this moment. If I cannot be loving, open, and aware in this moment, may I be kind. If I cannot be kind, may I be non-judgmental. If I cannot be non-judgmental, may I not cause harm. If I cannot not cause harm, may I cause the least harm possible. And so this is the part that we can often get attached to or stuck in, that this path on the left side of the image, that this path is simply about personal awakening, individual enlightenment. But part of Samma Sankappa is renunciation. And so can we renounce that view? And can we be doing all that we're doing for all beings, for the liberation, freedom from suffering for all beings, no one excluded, no one exploited? So it's this both and. This internal, external part of the practice invites us to be mindful of the impacts, both on individuals and groups, so that we have this possibility of, or opportunity at increasing our awareness, increasing our learning, and feeding back into what can help create less suffering in the world, now and in the future, for ourselves and all beings. Yeah, all right, friends. So those are some of my reflections for this time of year. May there be something in there for you. May it have been fruitful in some way. And if it wasn't, that's okay too. But whatever you got out of it, just may it be of benefit for all beings. No one exploited, no one no one excluded, no one exploited.